John Campbell here with the market report. Tuesday, winter livestock, La Junta, Colorado. Handle was a little over 1,400 cattle. Not quite the selection on these light stocker steers. They might have been off a buck or two, but had a good run of these little straight-tailed stocker yearlings that'd go to grass. They'd have been $2 to $3 better. Butcher cow market, certainly $1 to $2 higher. I guess it's no surprise the NCBA comes out and they're against mandatory price discovery, negotiated sales, and I think their voice is a little one-sided. You've got their affiliate members that are made up of the Texas Cattle Feeders Association, the Kansas Livestock Association, and I believe their dues structure is based on the numbers of cattle you got on feed, and or the number of cattle you have in control of or in your possession. That's how you pay the dues. Well, the corporate feed yards, they've got all the cattle on feed, and they're the ones that are keeping the doors open on that joint. And so we're barking up the wrong tree if we think we're going to get an endorsement from the NCBA. Remember when it was called NCA, National Cattlemen's Association? Well, then they added the B, NCBA. And I'm not sure if the B stands for Brazilian or for bullshit, but those terms are interchangeable in my book. I've heard a couple college professors in the last week, or economic instructors, I guess, talk about our situation is just purely a case of supply and demand. And, last September we had a fire at a Tyson plant, one of the Packers plants of the four. By the end of the week, the fat cattle had dumped $10 a hundred, and the meat had gone up $25 a hundred. Well, you got the Packer. He's the only demand for these fat cattle. And there aren't very damn many of them. And then once they get control of all the fed cattle, they're the only supplier to the retailer. And I guess that's pure supply and demand. I get it. But the next lecture I get, I'd like to hear from the professor of business law and tell me how these corporate monopolies play into supply and demand, and how price fixing can have an effect on supply and demand, and antitrust laws and how they affect supply and demand. That's the lecture I want to hear. We talk about negotiated sales and lack thereof. And the last fat cattle I sent in, I didn't even get a bid. I got the average of whatever the cattle in Nebraska brought. Well, hell, that's not a cattle market. That's a giveaway program. You used to call it grade and steel. And it's tough to have negotiated sales when you've got the corporates feeding the vast majority of them, and the ones they're not feeding, the feedlot guy has got a contractual agreement with one packer. Hell, that's 85% of the population. What do they do? Well, I have these cattle to sell here. Well, what do you want to give for them? I'm talking to myself. I'll bid you $1.10. Well, that sounds good. I'll just take that. That's no negotiation. You can't have a negotiation when you only got one buyer. And that's where we're at.